You're listening to America House Spooky Podcast, our series of Halloween campfire stories to get you into a spooky mood. This episode's story is entitled No Trespassing and read by Lucy Zoria. Keep listening if you dare.
No Trespassing. Peggy and her boyfriend Tommy were driving down a lonely stretch of highway at dusk when a thunderstorm came crashing down on them. Tommy slowed the car and they crept their way past a formidable abandoned house. Plastered all over the fences and trees were no trespassing signs. A mile past the house, the car hydroplaned. Peggy screamed as the car slid off the road, plunging down into a gully. The car slammed into a large boulder, throwing Peggy violently into the door before it came to a rest under a pecan tree. Her head banged against the window and a stabbing pain shot through her shoulder and arm. Tommy turned to her. "Are you all right? You're bleeding." "Arm, shoulder, feel bad," Peggy managed to gasp. Tommy glanced cautiously at her right arm. "I think your arm is broken," he said, and he tore a strip off his shirt and pressed it to the cut on her head. "I'm going to call for help," he said, when it became obvious that the bleeding was not going to stop right away. But neither of them had their cell phones. "That house we just passed will have a phone I can use," Tommy said. Peggy's eyes popped wide open at this statement. Despite her pain, she remembered the creepy, abandoned house. "Stay here. A car will come." "I can't stay, Peggy," Tommy said. "It could take hours for another car to come, and you're losing too much blood." He tore another strip of his shirt and placed it gently on the cut on her head. Then he went out and retrieved a couple of blankets from the trunk to cover her with. "I'll be back as soon as I can." He raced out into the storm, shutting the dented car door behind him. Peggy drifted in a kind of daze. Something at the back of her mind was making her uneasy. She slid down onto the floor and put her head on the seat, completely covering herself with blankets, head and all. Feeling safer, she allowed the weariness caused by the wounds to take over and fell asleep. Peggy wasn't sure what woke her. Had a beam of light shone briefly through the blanket? Did she hear someone curse outside? She strained eyes and ears, but heard nothing save the soft footing of the rain, and no light shone through the blanket now. If Tommy had arrived with the rescue squad, there surely would be noise and light and many voices. But she heard nothing save the swish of the rain and an occasional thumping noise, which she put down to the rubbing of the branches of the pecan tree in the wind. The sound should have been comforting, but it was not. Goosebumps crawled across her arms, even the broken one, and she almost ceased breathing for some time as some deep part of her inner mind instructed her to freeze and not make a sound. She did not know how long fear kept her immobile, but suddenly the raw terror ceased, replaced by cold shivers of apprehension and a sick coil in her stomach that had nothing to do with her injuries. Something terrible had happened, she thought wearily, fear adding yet more fatigue to her already wounded body. Then she scolded herself for a ninny. It was just her sore head making her imagine things. Somewhat comforted by this thought, she dozed again, only vaguely aware of a new sound that had not been there before. A soft thud-thud sound, as of something gently tapping the roof. Thud-thud, pattering of the rain. Thud-thud, silence. Sometimes she would almost awaken and listen in a puzzled manner. Thud-thud, patter of rain. Thud-thud. Had a branch dislodged from the tree? Peggy wasn't sure how long she'd been unconscious when she was awakened by a bright light blazing through the window of the car and the sound of male voices exclaiming in horror. A door was wrenched open and someone crawled inside. She lifted her head and looked up at the young state policeman. "Miss, are you all right?" he asked, and then turned over his shoulder to call for help. Peggy told the officers her story and begged them to look for Tommy. They deftly avoided answering her and instead called the paramedics. As the paramedics carried her carefully up the slope of the incline, Peggy looked back at the car and saw a grotesque figure hanging from the branch of a pecan tree. For a moment, her brain couldn't decipher what she was seeing in the bright lights of the police car parked at the side of the road. Then she heard a thud sound as the foot of the figure scraped the top of the totaled car, and she started screaming over and over in horror. One of the police officers hated to block her view, and a paramedic fumbled for some Valium to give her as her mind finally registered what she had seen. Tommy's mangled, dead body was hanging from a pecan tree just above the car, and nailed to the center of his chest was a no trespassing sign.
Boo to you from our crew. It's Lucy and Anna from America House Cave with you today, sharing some horror stories. Lucy, thank you for doing such a great job. I was having goosebumps for some point. And we also want to go through some vocabulary. But before that, I want to ask you about your experience in the US. I know you spent your childhood there. Was this story something familiar, or what kind of stories you were telling your friends during Halloween times?
I think this is a very American story in the sense that, car culture is such a big part of America. And especially the feeling of just driving for miles and miles, and then you get lost. And there are a lot of creepy places in the US. There's a lot of space, and when you're in the middle of nowhere, there's just you and your car and no cell service. Yeah, this felt very, very American in that sense. And as for ghost stories, I remember I went to summer camp when I was a kid, and there was this really scary story that they told one year about this lady they called Frusia. And Frusia, she lived in the woods of upstate New York. And at night, she would come out and steal campers. And she would, they would be sitting around a fire, toasting marshmallows, doing fun summer camp stuff. But she would grab someone and drag them into the woods. I don't remember all of the details, but I was so terrified by this story when I was 6 years old that my mother still remembers that I came back home and it took me months to be able to sleep properly. So, yeah.
Yeah, sounds spooky even at our age now. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, let's go through some vocabulary because some of the words were kind of difficult, and I've chosen a few of them, and you guys can look through the list under the description to our podcast or video. Let's start with kind of obvious word, but let's go through it. So, trespassing. So there was trespassing sign in this story, and the story is called No Trespassing. So let's talk about this word.
So trespassing is an action, and it comes from kind of to trespass. So you pass through a boundary, and a boundary that you're not supposed to go across. So people quite often, they put no trespassing on their private property because they don't want people to come in. They want they want for them to keep out. So it would kind of be, more formally, to trespass would be to enter someone's land or property without permission, or to commit an offense against a person or a set of rules. So in usage, this man who had trespassed against Judaic law. So it can be not only physical, but also just against rules, stuff like that.
So in everyday life, it can be used as a no entrance sign, no trespassing sign. They're kind of synonyms.
Exactly.
And this story taught us not to trespass if you see the sign.
You really shouldn't.
Okay, the next word is formidable. And in the story, there was a sentence. Tommy slowed the car and they crept their way past a formidable abandoned house. So let's go through this word.
So formidable is a quality that a person or an object might have, and it's a very powerful quality. And it usually inspires fear or respect through being impressive, large, powerful, intense, or capable. So when we talk about capable, you will often hear the phrase a formidable opponent. And this is someone that is like, this is truly a great opponent to go against, but a very challenging one as well. So in the story, we talked about how the building was formidable. So it gave a very intense impression, but it can be a quality used in a range of meanings.
Yeah, very clear. Thanks. Next word is creepy, and it's very Halloweenish word, and I like it a lot. It might be also obvious from the text, and we had example of also creepy and abandoned house. So, what are synonyms to this word, and what is the meaning behind it?
So creepy is a word that we use to describe a sensation that some people make us feel. You know, we can call a house creepy. We can call a person even creepy if we feel that they make us sense some unease or really something deeply unpleasant. So sometimes it's connected to, you know, feelings of fear. So hair-raising, terrifying, chilling. In America, we sometimes say, this person gave me the heebie-jeebies. So this is something that also you can use instead of, this feels creepy. This gives me the heebie-jeebies.
So now we know the range of synonyms for this word, and the last word is very cool. I think even in Ukrainian we use word creepy just with transliteration, and it's becoming very common now. The next word is uneasy, and it sounds very easy to understand, but it was about the main character, and in the sentence it was like this. Something at the back of her mind was making her uneasy. So from the first side, you think that this word means difficult, but the meaning when it's about the person, so what is that?
So uneasy is, again, a feeling that people get when something doesn't add up. I think it's a feeling very closely connected to intuition. You know, some people talk about a sixth sense that they feel that something is wrong. But this unease, it's basically a feeling that seems similar to anxiety, feeling troubled or uncomfortable, and some synonyms could be worried, anxious, or tense.
Let's go through the next word. I've chosen the word thumping, and here is the example from the story. But she heard nothing save the swish of the rain and an occasional thumping noise, which she put down to the rubbing of the branches of the pecan tree in the wind. So what kind of noise is thumping noise?
So thumping is a pounding or a throbbing in a heavy, continuous way. It can come from an object that's of impressive size, extent, or amount. And you can kind of hear that the word comes from the way it actually sounds. You know, when something heavy hits the ground, you get a thump, a thump. So that's really where it came from, I think. And some synonyms could be a thud is also used for a heavy sound. Yeah.
It's very easy to remember this word now with this sound example.
Yeah.
Okay, the next one is word nini, and I guess it's something informal, and the sentence sounded like this. Then she scolded herself for a ninny. And let's go through what scold also mean in this sentence.
So scold, first of all, is, you know, telling off someone. You know, you can scold a child for doing something bad. Also, synonym would be, you know, tell someone off. And so in this case, the character, she was like telling herself, but not even, you know, not in a nice way. When you tell yourself, but you're kind of, you know, put yourself together, you know. And so she was scolding herself. And ninny is a very funny word, and it's basically an informal usage to call a person foolish or weak. So it was a way of her bringing her strength and courage up.
Is this word offensive if you call someone like that, or it's more in a fun and kind way?
I mean, it can be fun, if someone doesn't want to jump into the pool, you can say, "Oh, don't be a ninny." So it's a bit cutesy, but with lots of words like this, it depends on how you use it. So it can be cute, but it can be mean, probably.
And our last word for today is kind of scary also. This is the word mangle. And it was in the end of the story. So Tommy's mangled dead body was hanging from the pecan tree. So from the context, it's kind of understandable, but let's discuss this word in detail.
So from the sentence, his mangled body, you already know that this is a descriptive word. So it describes what the body looked like. And so mangled is something that has been destroyed or severely damaged by tearing or crushing, by ruin or spoilage or any kind of damage, really. So mangled is heavily, heavily damaged in grotesque and unfathomable ways in this specific sentence.
Thank you, Lucy. And so, guys, we hope you expanded your vocabulary with some interesting, tricky, and spooky words today. To end up, I have a short Halloween joke. So, a typical American joke, I guess. Knock, knock.
Who's there?
Wanda Witch.
Wanda Witch who?
Wanda wish you a happy Halloween.
Aww.
Okay, thank you guys for listening to us. You can also hear more stories like this in this podcast series, so you're welcome. And have a beautiful Halloween.
Ooh.